Hey everyone, I hope you guys enjoyed your holidays with family or friends, or even if it's by yourself, I hope you made the best of it. But now I'm back to do some last minute reviews for 2018 before the new year comes around, and I think it's time I do a review that I've been delaying for quite a while. Aquaman is the latest movie in the DC Extended Universe, directed by James Wan, and stars Jason Momoa as Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman. So we first saw Aquaman in full in Justice League. I don't count that stupid cameo in Batman vs. Superman with the video files. So this movie takes place sometime after Justice League, where Aquaman is suddenly told that he has to head back to Atlantis because his half-brother, played by Patrick Wilson, wants to declare war on the surface world. Basically, it's for all the polluting and damage that the surface world has caused to the ocean. I could kind of understand the reasoning, but maybe you want to talk things out before you openly declare war. So with Aquaman being half Atlantean on his mother's side and half human on his dad's side, it's up to him to try to go down there and stop this war from happening and possibly become the new ruler of Atlantis. So I held off on this review for a couple reasons. One, the original recording I did, I wasn't really satisfied with it, so I wanted to do it over again. Also, it was a holiday, so I was busy spending time with my family, and then there was a lot of non-holiday related stuff going on in my personal life that I had to deal with, which is actually good because it's allowed me to think about this movie for a little longer and realize that it's not very good. Now, I went into this movie optimistic. I wanted this movie to be really good. And I do have several problems with this movie to keep me from liking it, but I will admit that it is fun, and it is helped by a couple things. One, Jason Momoa as Aquaman. I have never liked Aquaman as a character. I just thought he was goofy. I never could take him all that seriously. Even in the animated Justice League series from the early 2000s, which is awesome, I never really liked the character of Aquaman. I always liked Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, or any of the other characters in that crew. And even with the casting of Jason Momoa and the redesign of Aquaman in the DC Extended Universe, I just felt like they were trying way too hard to make him seem cool. But I actually did enjoy him in Justice League, and here he has the charisma to carry this entire movie. He's very charming, he has a great personality. Some of the stuff involving his powers that I thought was kind of goofy beforehand, like him talking to the fish or that yellow jumpsuit, they actually make it work. They actually make it look pretty cool, I gotta say. And the movie is at its best when it's about him, because he's the only guy in the movie that seems to get it. Well, one other person does from time to time, but he's the only guy that seems to get it. He's having fun with the role, and yeah, that's where the movie is at its most fun. What I also really like about the movie is the look of it. I've always had a big problem with the look of the DC Extended Universe movies because they just feel like something not real. Even when you look at Earth, with the exception of Wonder Woman, the cities always look either deserted or they just don't feel real. So with Atlantis being a fictional world, I actually dug it a lot. It's got a great look to it with its production design. The costumes, as outlandish as they can be, look really cool. They got some really great designs here, and even the CG has gotten better. The CG in all the other DCEU movies have looked terrible, especially in Batman vs. Superman and Justice League. But here, even though the CG is not flawless, and there are a few moments where I'm like, wow, you guys really didn't care about these fish at all. Most of the time, it looked pretty good. The first couple of action scenes throughout this movie I thought were kind of fun in terms of the way it's choreographed and the way it's shot. So there's a lot that I really like about this movie, but then there's so much else in this movie that just kills it for me. And I can point out three big problems with this movie. The three things that absolutely kill this movie from me really liking it. The first thing is the script. Sure, it's a simple story about two brothers fighting for the throne. We've kind of seen this before. It has a very Shakespearean quality to it. But there's just way too much going on in this supposed simple story. A lot of characters in this movie really don't add a whole lot. Black Manta especially. I don't know that much about the villain in the comics since I'm not really big on DC's characters. But just based on this movie, if you took the character of Black Manta out, nothing would have been missed. Cutting that character out would have made for a more well-paced movie, and he really serves no purpose other than setting up the sequel, and he's not in it for very long to really justify being in the movie to begin with. And then there's also the dialogue. Some of the dialogue in this movie, especially from your villains, is just horrible. It's horribly delivered, it's terribly written, it's just not good at all. It just doesn't feel natural. Again, whenever Jason Momoa is on screen and he's doing his stuff, it feels very natural and real. Now, speaking of the villains, this brings up the second issue I have with this movie, the villains. They suck. To me, the DC Extended Universe still has not had a good villain whatsoever, and whenever people tell me that the DC Universe as a whole have some of the greatest villains of all time, I mean, Batman, yes, but when it comes to the DC Universe entirely, I just go, are you guys sure? I already mentioned Black Manta, but you have Patrick Wilson in this movie as the Ocean Master. But the biggest problem with him and a lot of the other villains in this movie is that while Jason Momoa really gets this movie, is having fun with it, Patrick Wilson is taking this way too seriously. Like, he is so serious, he's almost deadpan in a way, and that just doesn't really mesh well when he's riding a giant mosasaurus, or when he's talking to an entire fleet of soldiers riding seahorses and sharks. They really could have made that side of the movie a little more campy, and with the villains, they just failed miserably to the point where it's silly in all the wrong reasons. It goes back to my big issue with Batman vs. Superman, where it's so serious that it's hard to really take it all that seriously. It really becomes silly at a certain point, especially that moment in the movie where he declares himself as the Ocean Master. When that moment happened, I was expecting the entire audience to burst out laughing. It reminded me of the mid-credit scene in Venom where Woody Harrelson goes, "There's gonna be carnage." Not as bad as that, but still pretty bad. And then the last problem I have with the movie is the fact that this is 2.5 hours. Because there is so much going on in this movie, it just drags out tremendously. And why is this 2.5 hours? This should have been a very simple, straightforward story, but there is so much going on. And a big problem with this movie being as long as it is that the first hour of it, maybe first 45 minutes, it was a struggle for me to watch. I actually thought it was the worst part of the movie, because most of it is just nothing but exposition on Aquaman's origin story, where his mother came from, what happened to her ever since she disappeared and went back into the ocean. The entire history of Atlantis is pretty much explained through exposition. We just never really get a full sense of this world. As great as Atlantis looks, it just really is a lot of exposition, and it's just so dull. So again, that first hour is just kind of rough to watch. But soon after that point, once Aquaman and Princess Mara, played by Amber Heard, go off into the desert to try to find this mystical Triton, that's when I felt like the movie is at its best points, when it's taken seriously, but just enough to where it's actually believable and not goofy. Because through that first hour, I thought Amber Heard was just kind of stiff. She just suffered from the same problem that the villains did. But at that certain point, once she teams up with Jason Momoa, that's when she starts to become more of a real person, and I started liking the character more, because her brief cameo in Justice League just seemed out of nowhere. They never properly introduced the character. I had no idea who she was. So this movie, while I'm not really crazy about it, at least I got a better sense of who Amber Heard's character was. And then we get into the final act of the movie, which is this big CGI battle. It's fun, but it just feels like it came out of nowhere, and it ends way too quickly. Which is funny, for a movie that's 2.5 hours, they really rushed that ending. So I had a lot of time to think about this movie. The stuff that I liked about it, I really did like, but the stuff that I really didn't like just hurt this movie to no end, to where I can't say it's really that good. If you enjoyed this movie, that's totally fine, but I just think there are better comic book movies out there in this year alone. But because it has its few good moments here and there, I'm going to say watch at your own risk. For me, this is middle of the road when it comes to the DCEU. Wonder Woman is still at the top. I still enjoy Justice League, but on a very bare bones level, even though there are some terrible things in that movie. Then Aquaman, it would be at number 3. Everything else is just plain garbage. My biggest disappointment with this movie comes from the fact that I really loved Wonder Woman, and I guess I was just expecting another movie on the level of Wonder Woman. Because this movie didn't go through the production troubles that Justice League did, and there's no Zack Snyder on board, I was hoping that this would be better, but I just really was let down by this movie. I was really disappointed. Not one of the worst movies of the year, not even my biggest disappointment of the year, but I'm just still hoping for the DC Extended Universe to really get back on their feet and start making movies just like Wonder Woman. And that's my review for Aquaman. Now I want to hear what you guys have to say. If you've seen the movie, what did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And how do you rank the DCEU movies? Where does Aquaman rank for you personally? And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media. And until next time, this is the Real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one.